to upload their paper once, sometimes that happens. So those of you who were unable to upload it, if you try it today, I bet it'll work. Because there's less people doing it. So that could be the issue. But again, if it is some kind of technical issue with whatever computer you're using, you need to know how to convert these things. Like when I got this new Dragon software, I had to learn how to add memory to my computer. So I had to open it up and go to the store and buy a memory chip, put it in, make sure to reconfigure it. Now I don't need some idiot at the Geek Squad, which the word geek means people who bite heads off of live animals in a circus, so you can call yourself that all you want. I'm not going to go to you if that's who you are. And they run around in cars that look like cows, which doesn't give me a lot of confidence anyway. I don't want somebody jokey that's going to work on my computer, just like I wouldn't want an exterminator to be telling jokes. Get to your job and kill the rats or the cockroaches, dude. Don't make jokes about it, man. So anyway, but I don't need to go to Best Buy or any of these places and have somebody pay $300-400 to fix my computer. Just like if I learned how to fix my car. You know. Same with if you don't know how to cook, then you have to get other people to do it for you. Learn these skills are important. Computer skills especially. I'm telling you that some of you are going to get a job based solely on your ability to use computers over somebody else, like at a nursing job or something like that. You think at a nursing job there's no computer entry? For a school? I do all my grades on, and there's PeopleSoft, so it's a software like that. So anyway, all right. So let's turn back to our discussion of the media. We're going to start out. I'm going to ask you. We're going to do this every single day. On Monday, I gave you guys a little bit of a break because the test was due about the reading, but you better have read today. On top of that, the reading for Monday is the link is in the syllabus. Okay, so what you want to do is if you download the syllabus, it's on there. Just put Control and click, and it should take your whatever your browser is straight to the reading. If you have trouble accessing it, let me know. I'll put a copy up on Blackboard just in case. It's somewhat long. But a lot of the stuff is just references in the back. I only want you to read pages 1 through 18. It's the APA report on the sexualization of girls in the media. I think you guys will find this a very interesting study. It's basically a meta or a literature review, not a meta-analysis, but an intense literature review of what material's out there that sexualizes women, what's the impact on young girls in particular, and what are some extenuating factors that prevent the self-sexualization of girls when they see this content. That watching Britney Spears may lead people to internalize her value system and potentially act like her. That's all we need is more Britney Spears in this world. So anyway, so we're going to talk about each day we come in. I'm going to ask you questions about the article, and if I don't get at least 3 or 4 people who know what the article is, so this is like your classmates can save you here, okay? It's almost like a volunteer fire department where only 3 people are fit enough to get anyone out of a building. Let the other 3 firefighters pull you out of this trouble. But if I don't get sufficient responses to where I can tell you read the book, we're going to have written quizzes every single day on the articles. It won't be anything too crazy, but it will be enough to where I can tell whether or not you're reading. Hopefully it will encourage you to read. Okay. Remember as well that our 3rd book is the Waco book, Armageddon in Waco, so make sure you have purchased that. Probably some of you can get that at a local library or something, and I believe that is downloadable on Amazon. Has anybody done that? So it's on there. So if you, and I would bet if it's on Amazon, iPads can download stuff off of Amazon, correct? All right, so there is some compatibility. Amazon and Apple never had the problem with each other, so Amazon sells anyway. That's why they call them Amazon. Anyway, all right. So what was today's article about, and what were some of the interesting findings? Yeah. Interesting suggestions about media. Obviously, it was about media. Tell me your name again, Eric.
Yeah. It was about media and media's influence on children's emotions and how they are afraid of things. They're looking at TV and maybe listening to the radio because media sometimes only show conflict because that's what sells.
Right.
And when they do that, children takes in a lot of news and a lot of TV shows that not maybe healthy for their emotions.
Okay. And this is for the whole class, were all the effects they found to be negative? Go ahead. Tell me your name again. Sorry.
Joe.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, they said that some of them actually helped kids, like media that was geared towards youth, actually helped them to socialize outside of a media.
Do you remember what effects that they said? They said it develops particular types of emotional, certain parts of moral and emotional development related to social circumstances. Do you remember what emotion? Go ahead.
It's called altruism.
What's altruism? Anybody know what that means? It's related to charity. What is it if you say somebody did it? The president performed an altruistic act today, or selfless to some extent, like a sacrificial thing. Like an altruistic act would be just like you won the lottery, but you gave every bit of it away. Or maybe even better, somebody was drowning in a lake, and you went in after them, even though maybe you're afraid of water or something like that. Like there's an element of sacrifice. And an altruistic act can be something like a charitable work. It can be like trying to rescue somebody. It can just be putting yourself in harm's way to make a point. An altruistic act, for example, at the University of Virginia, for example, the students and some of the student athletes are going on a hunger strike until the maintenance people receive a living wage. There's no real reason for them to do this necessarily, but they feel, because they're not going to necessarily benefit from it directly, although you could say they could indirectly benefit from it, but they're doing this anyway, right? That they're risking something to go out here and do this type of thing. Maybe adopting a child who was abused is an altruistic act, those types of things. Sacrificing for other people. What were some of the other emotions? Positive, they call them pro-social effects, right? One of the things that the article suggested, and if you haven't read it, I hope you read it. You need to for the test. I think you'll enjoy it. One of the things they said is there's antisocial behavior that the media is correlated with, media exposure is correlated with in children, and pro-social. So what were some of the other pro-social effects? One of them they don't mention is that television is connected to the development of environmental values. So people who think Captain Planet had no effect on people, it obviously did. Yes?
Because of the media, children get to pick up emotions easier.
Okay, so but what pro-social emotions? Like I believe it was on like page 109.
Just because like
105.
They watch TV, they learn about emotions better, like watching other people go through it.
Okay, that was in the beginning of the article, but further on, later on in the article, turn it to page 105 if you got it. Tell me what it says there. Because this is an important thing. People want to know why people are less racist, overtly racist. So empathy is part of it. So we got altruism, which teaches at least people what it is. It doesn't mean that kids who watch TV are going to engage in altruistic acts, because there are other aspects of the media that damage altruism. But what's empathy? What's that mean? To say something like, I empathize with the Iraqi people, what's that mean?
You can like feel for someone else.
Right. Maybe I haven't experienced exactly like remember the Jerry Sandusky case? People were often saying, I empathize with the victims. You know, maybe even sympathize. Which sympathy is sort of taking pity on somebody. Empathy is a higher reality than that. Empathy is, what would you imagine what you would feel like in that situation to get a greater understanding of what somebody else's view. This empathy is often used to diffuse conflict. Like you get into an argument with somebody else, and somebody maybe sits you down, like an arbitrator, or one of your friends even says, well, why don't you see it from this person's perspective, right? You know that, hey, like you get into an argument about something at your dorm room, or maybe an argument over a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or somebody insulted somebody, or whatever it is, and someone says, well, you know what, this person's gone through this and that and this. Or maybe somebody was overly emotional and say, well, you know what, look, his mom just died. And it tends to make you moody or something. So maybe be a little more sensitive to people. It's a level of sensitivity. It is on some level social sensitivity that, okay, maybe I don't know what it was like in the 1960s to be black and be treated like dirt, like in Jim Crow laws and stuff, but can I imagine that? And it's actually something that a journalist named John Howard Griffin, anybody ever read the book Black Like Me? Nobody's read this book? Read it if you get the chance. John Howard Griffin in the 1950s took this medication that made him look black, and then he went into the deep south and pretended to be black to develop a sense of what it was like. And one of the most interesting things about the book is that he was so ingrained into, like, for example, in the South, if you were a black man, you didn't dare talk to, whistle, look at, or dress a white woman. Seriously. That was the end of you. Emmett Till did that. He was a 14-year-old boy. They killed him over this stuff. Okay, they lynched people over this stuff. John Howard Griffith said that even though he knew he was still white, like the color of his skin like started to impact his personality and how he saw himself. And when he was talking on the phone with his wife, who was white, he thought to himself, with nobody else in the room, I shouldn't be talking to this woman. It started to ingrain inside his head, and he said that he'll never be the same afterwards. Now, obviously, we can't go that far, but empathy is a way to reduce social division, increase social sensitivity. Like, the women's movement tried to do that to men, going, why don't you see it from our perspective? You can't get in any real schools. You won't let us be in any big-time professions like law and medicine. When we get beaten by our husbands, the police officers do absolutely nothing. Okay? We make 50% of the wages of men. See it from our side. And some men did. Other men were like to be quiet. You're lucky you get anything. Okay? Lucky those men are probably either dead or in jail, or both. I don't know if they keep dead people in jail. I doubt they go check on Charles Manson that much. You think he would have dropped dead by now. Anyway, so I mean, it's like today, Davy Jones died at 66. Charles Manson's already older than him, and he lived in prison. You'd think living outside of prison, you'd be healthier. Anyway, maybe he had supposedly he had heart disease. Anyway, so what was the last one? You got it open? What was the last one? There was another one on there too. It was related to altruism and empathy.
Last thing on there is social interaction.
All right. So actually, there's four then. So social interaction is one of them. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say acceptance of others.
You're right. Acceptance of others. Why is that important in a society like the United States, or in any world, any society, any community? Why is that important that the TV teaches those types of things? Joe?
Society in general is so diverse that it like teaches everyone like equality and like the meaning of life.
Even if it's not, even if you live in a society like Japan where it's basically 97% similar ethnic background, is it important for Japanese people not to just see their own situation as the only situation that exists? Or like if you live in an all-white country, it's still important for you not to have bad attitudes towards people of different races or different cultures. We've seen where that happened. There weren't a lot of black people in Germany during the 1930s, but Hitler still hated them. And it probably was part of the reason why he hated them, because there were none in this country. So he had no understanding, and he believed, just as television can teach people that these type of people, quote unquote, are this way, it can teach you stereotypes, it can also help diffuse stereotypes. That's why Dave Chappelle's show is so controversial. Is he attacking stereotypes, or is he reinforcing them? Because you could easily say he's reinforcing the stereotypes. You could also easily say that he's destroying them, attacking them. What's one of the main differences? Many times, how the media interacts with pre-existing conditions. Like what? What did the Kaiser Family Foundation said impacted young people's use of media, the time they spend with media? One of the big factors. And they talk about this as a mediating factor. What do you think is going to stop a young person, or is going to help a young person understand what a media meaning is? Who do you think is going to do that? Say it. Their parents. Okay? From what we know from the time bind and the intersection reader, do parents sit down with their children and watch Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and tell them that, Bobby, you shouldn't kick people? This is fake violence? Or do sometimes, here's another thing. Does TBS show violent action adventure movies at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday? Some of you are shaking your head no. Why don't you go check their schedule? Let me put it another way. How hard is it for a young person who's home alone, a latchkey kid, to find adult material on a cable station? How hard is it? What if their parent... It's not hard at all, right? For the most part. What if the parents block the TV channels out? Where can the child go now to get an adult film? All right, so they block the internet. Now what can they do? Huh?
Watch it something else.
Something like, yeah, or maybe a smartphone. Most parents, there's no VCHIP in a smartphone, is there? Can you change the privacy setting and not allow certain sites? So, can you? But do most parents, do you think they do that? So, can you download porn on your phone? Or look at porn? So kids can do this, can't they? You think they haven't figured that out? I hope that most of them wouldn't be doing that kind of stuff, but still. Okay? So there's an issue with this element of that, yes, it seems that parental influence in at least the development of critical analysis skills. And it also depends on how old the child is and what material it is. If a 6-year-old watches a horror movie, that's going to have probably both a short and a long-term effect. What was one of the things that they said about what happens to kids who watch violent content or aggressive content? There's two main things they said occur that seem almost the opposite of each other, but aren't. One of them said it cultivates what? And they used the word cultivation theory, which we'll talk about. Which I believe is on page 90. Let me check. Page 95. What did they say kids watching news programs and crime programs and stuff like that does? Especially news programs, yes.
Cultivates a desensitizing.
That's one thing. So that's not a good thing, is it, Eric?
They think that's how the real world is, because that's what's shown on TV.
So they're going to tend to, if their parents make them sit down and watch the Channel 5 news, which most parents don't do this kind of stuff, although kids will come across it, or watch a horror movie, or a CSI episode, which is probably worse than a horror movie, or Criminal Minds is a horror movie. Okay? I was talking to my other class, I saw the one with Freddie Munoz on it, where he's the plot of the show, and this could have been accessed by an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. The plot of the show was that they went out walking one night, I guess it was New York or Chicago or something, and he ran into a street gang. And the street gang raped his girlfriend and made him watch. So that ain't the end of it. Then he was a comic book writer, and so one of his comic books was about like a vigilante hero. So he went and got 2 swords and went and cut off the heads of all these people. That's what passes for entertainment in this world. Gang rape, voyeuristic gang rape, and torture, and beheadings. I mean, that's what you think. Kids think the world is safe when they see stuff like that, right? I mean, you can understand why 10 and 11-year-olds get confused and scared, can't you? I mean, I haven't even told them about the national debt. That probably should scare them even more. I'll tell you right now, there's a 100% guarantee your life is going to be impacted by the national debt. You only got like a 1% chance to be murdered. And in some areas, like in rural Montana, your chances of being murdered are almost 0. It's like 0.0000001%. You know, in Montana, there's probably more murders in Brooklyn in 1 month than there is in the entire state of Montana in an entire year. I'm serious. Think about it. Who's murdering who in Montana? There's where you see the family murders. Somebody says something, the Christmas dinner murder or something. I'm serious, something like that. But you rarely, I could be wrong about this, but you're not going to probably see something like what happened in Ohio, where some kid just shows up at a Cleveland school and starts shooting people. That comes out of frustration, that comes out of stress, that comes out of urban environments, that comes out of meaningless suburban environments, the surrealistic, meaningless nature of like the safety of suburban life drives some kids crazy. That's why, like Littleton, where the Columbine shooting took place, was one of the most affluent communities in the United States. Right? And who knows what the real motivation completely for these kids were. So, or Cho with Virginia Tech, you know. Although that was a rural community, but it was a concentrated community with young people. And where you find young people, the police know this, what do you find? Drugs. Yeah, and crime too, you know. Sometimes you got to commit the crime to get the drugs, or you get the drugs and then you commit a crime. The drugs themselves are a crime. So. Anyway, all right. So, but so one of them is fear of society or fear of strangers. Which is that a good thing to have in society? To have people be afraid of strangers? Does that tend to make does that make society, when you live in a community where people are very suspicious, what's that feel like when you go out in public? Well, let me put it this way. When you have an instance where people are suspicious and paranoid of each other, and somebody bumps into somebody at the movies, does it turn out well, or can it get really ugly real quick? Are people like, oh, I'm sorry, oh, excuse me, oh, well, that's okay, man. Or is it, what the hell's your problem? You better apologize. Or does that kind of stuff go on? Or if there's a small fender bender on the road, where people are more respectful for each other, have a little more empathy for each other, they get out of the car, maybe they talk calmly about it, even if, oh, I'm sorry, that was my fault. What happens sometimes around here? Right? I had somebody said, one of my students a couple years ago said that some guy pulled a gun on her on the northern state because he cut her off. Now, she did flip him off, which again, one thing I've learned in Suffolk and Nassau County, that's a pretty inflammatory thing. And where I'm from in Ohio, people don't get all up in arms because somebody stuck their finger up at somebody. That seems absurd to most people. And it's a gesture of, hey, you did something wrong and here's your reward. Around here it's, get out of your car and you're going to die. That's where it comes. Or pull over, or we're going to fight. It's like, what are you going to tell the cops? Like if someone punched somebody else because they flipped them off, what are you going to tell the cops? That I pulled over because I couldn't take it because somebody stuck one of their fingers up at me? I mean, it's like a Seinfeld episode or something, isn't it? People need to calm down. But that's the problem when you have low levels of social empathy. And I'm not saying that this is, like there are places that display worse, like you go to Detroit, don't talk about lack of social empathy. So I'm not saying that Long Island's so terrible, but certainly it is not like if you go to rural Pennsylvania, where, I'm telling you right now, if you did something rude in rural Pennsylvania, like 30 people might gather around and just start talking to you about it. Like, what is your problem? Who raised you? Maybe someone pulled guns out at you. I'll tell you right now. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I'll tell you right now, the city with the worst road rage issues is Phoenix, not New York. And I've been to Phoenix, and they make people here look very calm, but in general, and like I said, hopefully you guys aren't getting the wrong impression, but let's face it, there is an issue with road rage around here, isn't there? I mean, I'm not making this up. I commute every single day around here, and I see it every day. It's almost like I have to go get like do a meditation or like Zen stuff before I get in the car. I'm like, okay, no anger. Oh. Just ignore them. It can't hurt you. And it's not everybody. It's always, there's part of the problem. If you have like 10% of the population are jerks, it makes everybody else, it makes it look like there's a lot more, doesn't it? Because look, think about it this way. If one out of, let's say you go to a rural place and 1 out of 100 people are jerks, and then you go somewhere else like Chicago and 1 out of 10 people are jerks, doesn't it seem like it's a lot more than just 10 times as many jerks? It feels like 100 times as many, right? And because jerks are so vocal, right, they make everybody else look bad. And I've actually had people in Long Island go, don't pay attention to people like that. That's not the way all of us are. I mean, I've had people say that kind of stuff, you know. So again, maybe I run into the jerks. Maybe I don't do the finger thing anymore, but I used to do that. I learned my lesson. People should lighten up. I like Jerry Simon said, give them the toe. That takes some work. You got to get your shoe off, your sock up, stick it up in the air. I mean, what good is a finger? I mean, or next time I'm going to do this. They'll probably still pull over. That guy gave me the pinky. Anyway, I hope there people won't start wars over fingers. But anyway, all right. So again, so one of them is antisocial behavior. Another one is fear of violence. Another one also that she talked about was that media it leads to aggressive behavior. That kids who watch Mighty Morphin Power Rangers tend to imitate aggressive behavior. Now, one of the things she doesn't talk about in the article is some of the extenuating factors. And some of the things we find, and we'll go along here as we go along in this section, we'll talk more about this. This idea here that if someone is aggressive or was taught the wrong lessons by their parents, or some children are just have high levels of energy. These children, if they get to define violence as socially acceptable, or as an acceptable way to deal with issues, they will imitate violence. You can actually see this on page 97. If you actually read here, it says Marina Kramer and her colleagues have conducted several studies on whether watching violence on TV affects children's moral reasoning. In one survey, they presented 6 to 12-year-olds with hypothetical stories in which a perpetrator performed aggression either for reasons of protection, called justified violence, or for random reasons, called unjustified violence. Most of the children perceived the unjustified aggression to be wrong. So it's in the context in which they learn this. Okay. Whereas if they watch Die Hard, they learn that aggression is funny, and shooting 100 people on the way to kill a kidnapper is just what you do. I mean, I think I've told you this before. I've always found it bizarre, and I know that there are movies and they're like supposed to be this way. That Bruce Willis, on his way to go get his wife, kills 40 other people, blows up 5 buildings, destroys 100 cars, wrecks the entire road, you know? I mean, and then doesn't even, like, you don't even, he should be on trial for manslaughter. Okay? Imagine if during a police chase, a cop shot 5 people and ran over 15. You think that wouldn't be in the paper? But he caught the guy. And then after he shoots somebody, he's always got some quip. Like, should have bought more life insurance. He died of lead poisoning. You know, something stupid like that. Like, it makes a big joke out of violence. And also sends a signal that if someone kidnaps your wife or your children, you're allowed to do anything to get them back. I mean, anything. Right? Isn't there a movie where The Rock is like some kind of guy, he comes back to his hometown, there's a bunch of gangsters and drug dealers they need, and deputized, and he just goes around shooting people. Does he shoot people in that movie?
Yeah, and he's got like a
without trial?
He's got a 2x4.
Yeah, he's beating the hell out of people in the middle of the streets. I mean, really, that's what we need, right? People like beating people up on the subway because they think like somebody's being rude. I mean that's where, you know, again, most people watch that and go, I would never do it. First of all, nobody hears The Rock. And if The Rock wanted to do that, he probably could get away with it for a while until they put his 15 stun guns. They'd need an elephant stun gun for him or something like that. It's a big guy right there. So anyway, but again, and why does Hollywood show that kind of stuff? Because it sells. You know, Die Hard itself became sort of a joke of itself. Like after the 3rd or 4th one, it was sort of a caricature, right? Like, isn't the 3rd or 4th one he's jumping out of helicopters and stuff and like wrecking motorcycles into buildings? He's almost like Superman. He's like, he can't get hurt. You know, it's like the Terminator or something. So anyway, there's a movie, Die Hard versus Terminator. They'll make it. You know, just wait 5 minutes. You know, it's like the weather in Florida. You don't like the movies? Wait 5 minutes. It'll be another crappy one. Anyway, a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh, I'll check out Movie Phone and see what's on. I was like, there was like 16 movies. I was like, this is trash. Every bit of this is trash. So I went and saw The Phantom Menace in 3D and made my nose itchy to wear these goofy glasses on. Anyway, but George Lucas got his money. Most of the children perceived the unjustified aggression to be wrong, but children who were heavy viewers of fantasy violence programs, such as Power Rangers, which is a psychotic, surrealistic cartoon where like the people, they kick like this and they go crazy. Like it is, and the music is all like techno and like upbeat, and like people want to know why kids are being misdiagnosed with ADHDs because they just got done watching that show. And kids that are suffering really from ADHD, because there are, look, just like ADHD and some forms of autism get overdiagnosed, there are actually, I have seen kids who were severely autistic, but this is not a joke. Okay? And same with ADHD, that these kids cannot sit still for 2 seconds. Those people need medication and therapy. Most kids who have ADHD we used to call that childhood. Just like social anxiety disorder, which some people have severe forms of it, like Ricky Williams. He wore his helmet when he would do interviews. He had an issue. It locked him up inside. Most other people, it's normal not to want to go in front of the class and speak. But that gets redefined as something that, like, there's something wrong with that or something. I was very shy when I was younger. I'm glad they didn't put me on medication. God knows what this stuff does to you over the long run. So, anyway, and one of the studies I want to do is that are kids who take medication before the age of 10, are they more likely to become drug addicts? I almost bet you there'd be about 50% correlation between that. You learn very young that when you feel discomfort or you want to feel better, you pop a pill. And now with pills being almost the #1 form of drug use, or at least one of the top ones, I mean, the only thing that's even bigger is alcohol. I mean, there are as much people using, kids are probably using pills as the way former generations used marijuana. Like, this is something you do on the weekend. And maybe you do it with marijuana and with alcohol. And I would say to you, read up on Heath Ledger. So, anyway. More likely than children who seldom watch such programs to judge the justified aggression in the stories as being morally correct, and indeed researchers have found that much of the violence in popular superhero cartoons is portrayed as justified. Like Batman. He kills people. He murders people in the streets without a trial, without charging them with a crime, and he didn't even read him his rights. He just kills people. He's a murderer. Batman is a murderer, whereas Superman is not. Does Superman murder people? Look, they call Batman the Dark Knight, not the Knight of Lightness or something like that. Okay, he's a murderer. Most of these superheroes are murderers. Spider-Man, sometimes he arrests people, sometimes he kills people. Sometimes he pulls down stuff on top of them. That's why I like Catwoman. She just kills people. She's not trying to be a superhero, right? Especially like when Michelle Pfeiffer played Catwoman. Anyway, some of you are like, Michelle Pfeiffer played Catwoman. Yes! There was life before Halle Berry. Okay. I know that's hard to believe, and there was music before Lady Gaga. Anyway. In the Kramer study, both children who watched a great deal of fantasy violence and those who watched more realistic entertainment violence, such as Cops, displayed less advanced moral reasoning strategies, focusing more on rules and the presence or absence of punishment in their reasoning about moral dilemmas. Right, so you get an idea there. And she goes on to talk about all these different studies. I'm not gonna belabor each one of them. I do want to go to cultivation theory though, real quickly. This is one theory that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to move on to the slideshow. Cultivation theory. So mark down this page, and you're going to find this. This theory is one of the most well-known theories in media. It's a communication theory. It comes out of cultural studies too. It is basically the idea it was developed in the 1960s and 70s because researchers and the government wanted to find out what is the long-term effect of watching violence on TV or just watching TV in general. And one of the first things they thought, well, watching TV violence makes you violent. But for most people, they actually found the opposite, that it makes them less likely to commit violence because they become afraid of violence. And they also think, like for example, on CSI, does anybody get away? Law and Order, does anybody innocent? It wouldn't be a show if anybody was innocent. So these TV shows give the impression that the police are what?
Good.
Yeah, like they always get their man. And they also, I'll tell you right now, one of the things there's no doubt in my mind about that's going on is the police departments want people to think, whether it's Bumble Nowhere, Missouri, or whether it's New York City, that we've got the most high-tech advanced equipment. And we were able to do DNA tests on your blood. Do you think old Brookville, you've seen their little police station down here? They're lucky to have a copier in there. They're taking fingerprints with like ink, and like seriously, right? Whereas if you go to Manhattan, one of the more advanced precincts, they can match you up with Interpol and all kinds of, they've got computers in there where they can construct someone's face. Like based on or like get a picture and upload it, and then it matches your face to somebody else's face. Whereas I'm telling you right now, that's not going on down here. But they want you to believe that. They want you to believe that, because if you believe that, you're going to be less likely. And they certainly want you to believe that most people, if not all people who commit crimes, get caught. Right? That's a social order element, isn't it? So one of the things that goes on is that when people watch these types of shows, first of all, they overestimate the amount of crime in their neighborhood. They tend to fear strangers a lot more. And they tend to do things like support the death penalty, the expansion of the death penalty. People who watch high amounts of TV and are impacted by this fear level tend to have security alarm systems on their house. Many of them tend to own guns. So this has real ramifications for people's behavior. If you've ever met any of these kind of paranoid conspiracy types of people, this is exactly what you're talking. These are people who like think the UFOs are tied in with the mafia and Al Qaeda and the government to create some kind of one world government so they can steal your something. I don't know. Whatever it is. Some of these people are nuts. Anyway, but going off of the book here, media can also contribute to long-term fear through cultivation. Its influence on people's conception of social reality. That because the TV distorts things. Like for example, two things with murder. One, that all murderers get caught, when in reality, I've seen statistics from the FBI that says that only about anywhere from 47 to 55% of murderers get caught. That's it. If you murder a stranger, there's even a show that's like 48 hours or something. The 48 hours. If you murder a stranger and you get away with 48 hours, they're probably never going to catch you. Now, some people it's probably scaring the hell out of them. I hope nobody's in here going, really? And if you're nice to somebody and you have no motive, right, and it makes it look like an accident, like, I don't know how that mercury got in your coffee. Or something like that. I mean, if you really believe that sushi has mercury in it, you can just feed people sushi all day long. Eventually they're going to drop dead or put it in their light. The mercury makes you sick. Lead and mercury make you really sick. Anyway, now some of you are probably concerned, like, why did you know all this stuff about mercury? Mad Hatter went crazy because of mercury. Anyway. I remember when I was a kid, when you smash open a thermometer, mercury is called quicksilver. It comes back together. If you throw it on the ground, it will come back up together. That's what they use. Remember the Terminator 2? With the liquid metal on there. That's what that was. Mercury is a fascinating substance, but it's very dangerous. You damage your brain seriously. Anyway, but not only that most people get caught, but just as importantly that murder is the most common crime around, because that's what you see. Now, why is it, do you think, that newspapers and television news and television TV shows like to deal with murder as a subject, even though it's probably one of the least common crimes that's committed? Most people are not going to be murdered. I mean, if you want to go after somebody in this society, go after the people who sell disgusting food, because that's what's going to kill you. A car accident's going to kill you. Murder is not. And I'll tell you right now, people are afraid of things like being struck by lightning or being eaten by a shark. And I'm telling you right now that those things aren't going to happen, but you're more likely to be eaten by a shark than murdered. Okay, unless you have a very big family or a lot of friends, and then you have intensified the ring of potential murderers around you. 85% of murder is done by people who are either your friends or your family. Some of them sleep in the same bed with you, your husband or wife. That's a very common murder, Eric.
I just want to say the reason why TV use it is because the only thing they care about is money.
Right, and what do crime shows get you?
What it gets you? Ratings.
Right, and ratings translate into ad dollars, yeah. Right? So unless it's a Super Bowl, I'm going to show CSI. Okay? And how many CSIs are there? There's CSI Miami, there's CSI Special Victims Unit, there's Law & Order, Los Angeles, all this stuff. Right? There's 20 million. And on TBS and TNT, these things show, it's like they used to joke when I was a kid of the Gilligan's Island effect, that somewhere in the world a Gilligan's Island episode was being played. Now it's the Law & Order effect. Somewhere in this world, in some time zone, there's 5 Law & Orders being played. It's like, you ever turn on a radio station and they're playing one song and you switch to another radio station and they're playing the same song? Like at the same point too. It's really strange. You think that somebody switched your radio guy? That's kind of what goes on with CSI. Because they're money makers. You can just show them over and over again, and I know I can get this much viewers. Just like, what's the other subject that television likes to deal in particularly? Even radio gets into this with Howard Stern. Sex, nudity, romance. Not just sex, but romance too. Think about it, right? Think about stuff like TV shows like Modern Family or The Big Bang Theory or 2.5 Men. These are all about romance and sex. The intersection point, Desperate Housewives. That's about marriage, family, and romance, and sex. Right? Which, by the way, is going off the air. Or just Sex in the City, I mean. At least you got to hand it to them, they're just, hey, here it is. We're not even going to hide what it is. Right? But even in that one, isn't that more about romance? That's just as much about romance, isn't it? About ideas of romance, right? Because especially Sarah Jessica Parker's, doesn't she always try to get involved with whatever that dude was?
Space.
Right. Which is guy, he played Pompey in a version of like a made-for-TV version of Rome. And every time I see him, that's all I think is that there's that Roman emperor. Anyway, so again, cultivation theory has been applied to many types of reality beliefs, but much of the focus has been on our perceptions about violence. Researchers' preoccupation with violence is partly owing to the prevalence of aggression in American media. Large-scale studies of television programming have documented that nearly 2 out of 3 programs contain some physical violence, and that means kids' programs too. When I was a kid, Bugs Bunny used to smack everybody upside the face with sledgehammers. He'd throw dynamite down people's throats, and, shoot people in the face with shotguns. Him and Yosemite Sam had battle. Think of the Coyote and the Roadrunner. I mean, my gosh. Think of the Simpsons, right? The violence that goes on in that show. So, moreover, a typical hour of television features an average of 6 different violent exchanges between perpetrators and victims. The extent of violence in programs targeted to children is even higher. 70% of children's shows contain violence, with an average of 14 violent interchanges an hour. Then the violence falls into 2 main categories, although there is a third. You can say, let's start with the third. Realistic violence, which is news programming stuff. That's usually not geared towards children, but actually the study's shown that she quoted that sometimes tends to have a very large effect on younger children, especially the news. Number 2, cartoon or caricatured violence, where violence is funny, where Tom and Jerry smack the hell out of each other, right? And The Simpsons makes fun of this with Itchy and Scratchy, if you've ever seen the show, right? It's a cartoon inside the cartoon. Or on South Park, if you will, with Terrence and Terrence and Phillip, which is more of a fart joke, but they hurt each other too. There's violence there. And South Park's violent too. There's sometimes I'm real squeamish about blood, and I turn on that show and it's like blood everywhere. And it's like, my God, this stuff. So, and Family Guy's that way as well. And then third, there's vigilante type of justice, like the X-Men, or Spider-Man, or the Incredible Hulk, or my favorite murderer, Batman. Right? That Batman is a murderer, but he's presented as a hero. Okay? Because again, he doesn't put people on trial. Superman picks people up and he takes them to jail. And maybe he shouldn't, because we know what the criminal justice system is like in this country, and Lex Luthor keeps getting out. But I would also say to Batman's creators, if you keep killing the villains, there's not going to be any more stories. That's why Superman doesn't kill Lex Luthor. Because he's like, I won't have a job if this guy's dead, that kind of stuff. Anyway. But again, how does all this violence affect people's perceptions of reality? Here's the cultivation theory effect. Studies have found that frequent viewers of television, no matter what their age, see the world as more dangerous place and are more frightened of being a victim of violence than infrequent viewers are, which is out of proportion. If you live in a safe suburb, even if you live around here, should you really be worried about murder? Should this be your number one concern? You should probably be worried about vandalism. Or property theft. Someone stealing your grill from back of your house. That's what's going to happen. Somebody downloading porn off your wireless connection from outside your house while they're sitting in a car, which people do this stuff. Some guy who didn't password, this should be a lesson. Some guy in Buffalo who didn't password protect his Wi-Fi, the kid that lived next door downloaded a bunch of child porn, and the FBI busted in his house at 6 o'clock in the morning, dragging him down the stairs, going, "Come on, pervert! You got him up." And then later on, they took his computer and they analyzed it, and they said, "This stuff's not here." And I'm sure there was a lot of apologies, but I would have been like, I don't care how many times you apologize. You dragged me downstairs and called me a child pervert in front of my wife, in the middle, and woke me up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or Sunday. So be careful with those Wi-Fi connections, seriously. But again, most of the time, this is out of proportion to what the real threats are. I mean, let's take a look at this. Should people in North Dakota or Idaho be worried about terrorists attacking them? I don't think so. What are they going to attack? The potato fields? There ain't even enough people in Idaho really to damage enough to make it even a news story. I mean, you could attack Boise, but could you imagine the story? Boise today was attacked by Al-Qaeda. Even the leaders of Al-Qaeda would be like, "What? I told you Boston, not Boise. What are you doing?" Right? I mean, there's not enough people there. So again, but people in Boise, I guarantee you, if you ask them what are their top 5 fears, what do you think would be at least in that list? Terrorism. Now, I can understand being afraid of terrorism because it destroys the economy, right? And something like that. But these people are not afraid of that solely. They are physically afraid to die from a terrorist attack. Somebody's going to knock over a corn silo or something. It's not much in South Dakota or some of these places. Anyway, most of the evidence is correlational, but a few experiments using control groups show that repeated exposure to television violence increases people's fear of victimization. Combining all the evidence, Michael Morgan and James Shanahan, who they did a book called Television and Its Viewers, which is very good. I use it actually in my media class. There are problems with this theory, but it's still pretty good. Combining all the evidence, Morgan and Shanahan conducted a meta-analysis of published studies on cultivation that combined all the individual studies to get an aggregate number or numerical effect size, and this chart is on page 107. An effect size of 0.1 is considered small, 0.3 is medium, and 0.5 is large. Morgan and Shanahan found that television had a small but statistically significant effect on people's perceptions of violence. Meaning that people who watched higher amounts of TV were basically 10% more likely to be afraid of crime, or had a 10% higher fear of crime and victimization than people who did. Okay. The effect was slightly higher for adults than for children, but because fewer studies involved younger age groups. So you get an idea there. So hopefully, again, as we get closer to the test, I'll break this article down a little bit more. But even though we took a lot of the class with it, I think it's good. Also, it should give you an idea that I want you to read these things and teach you how to analyze this stuff. Now, again, as we go along and get closer to the test, we're going to break this down more. And some of these theories and some of these thoughts. So basically, we have this idea. You can break this article down in a couple ways. One, she used previous literature to back up what she was saying, and she tested two main ideas of the media. One, that it causes antisocial and negative effects on both the individual and society. And she found plenty of evidence for that. All right, we went over that. Two, that television is not as negative as people think it is. This is what I love. If you watch CNN, or you watch one of the, or like Oprah or something, what do they say that television does? Do they say it has negative or positive effects on people? On kids, especially. Right? Isn't that hilarious that the TV itself talks against itself? The TV says to parents, don't let your kids watch TV. Now what's up next? A kids show for your kids. Watch it. Oprah needs kids shows. So, supposedly Oprah now, she started her cable network, she's getting horrendous ratings. There's like 159,000 people watching her show. That's nothing. Okay, more people are watching that 2.5 Men show now, so which is supposedly rotten. Anyway, I never watched it in the first place. I told you I like the Big Bang Theory. So anyway, and then this idea of that is something that is manufactured by fearmongers potentially, or people who hate TV, or maybe people who want more educational programming. But the fact is, the evidence shows that TV does both. Now the question then becomes: how is that possible? And the answer on some levels is, look, these things are occurring at the same time. Just like TV can make you go out and buy more stuff, and it can also make you recycle. Isn't that weird? Isn't that wild? Okay? But we got to look at these. What are some other factors that are interacting? Like, I'll tell you right now, one of the things they found is that children who come from violent households, who view violent material, tend much more likely to commit violent acts. You don't find a lot of evidence that shows that just because kids watch the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that they go smack people upside the head, or that they grow up and become serial killers, or Batman, who's a serial killer anyway, right? That's why he wears a mask. I mean, look, if Batman was doing right, why is he hiding his face? And worst of all, he's like isn't he? Bruce Wayne is a billionaire. He's murdering people on the street. He could be Bernie Madoff. They need to do a Batman with Bernie Madoff. We kill him. Well, I'll accept that. You know. Anyway, all right. So let's go back to the slideshow here. So again, we'll come back to these things, and you'll see these themes repeated. You'll see these themes repeated in the article for the APA article that I'm going to have you read for Monday, and I think you'll enjoy that article too because it talks a lot about music videos and stuff like that. Probably needs to be updated, but whatever. All right, so back to where we stopped last time. This is the conflict theorist view of the media, and it's basically this idea that the media is a tool of corporations and economic institutions. That's Marx's view. Mills expands this out and says that not only is the media a tool of corporations, but of the military and of the government. And if you actually look at it, have you ever seen a war movie that really made the U.S. Army look bad? Look horrendous? I mean, maybe Sergeant Bilko or something. I mean, sometimes you get movies that make the Army look stupid. But when there's a controversial issue, many times the institution of the Army is left intact, whereas individual actors are attacked. General so-and-so is the one who made a mistake. Right? Very rarely do you ever see the U.S. military being roundly attacked as being imperialistic or overly bureaucratic or bloated and inefficient or dangerous or even a threat to the social order because of what it demands of the U.S. people. And the proof on some levels, if you look at war movies, especially about World War II, these are heroic movies about valor and bravery and stuff. Is war glamorous? At the base of it, what is war? What do you have to do to win a war? Yeah, you have to kill people. You don't tickle people. And nowadays with modern warfare or postmodern warfare, there's no such thing as surrender. Did they let Saddam Hussein surrender? Did the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi surrender? And this guy in Syria is going to find out that the United States and other people don't want him to surrender. I don't think the Israelis want Iran to surrender, do you? And I don't think the Iranians want Israel to surrender either. They want to destroy these countries. So we're in a dangerous position here. And I'll tell you right now, you ask anybody who's ever been to war, they don't, even though they may feel that their experience in the Army made them a better worker or something, I doubt they think that it helped their psychological well-being. That's why so many soldiers suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. You do things in war you shouldn't have to do, like shoot women and children, or watch people's bodies burn, right? Or shoot somebody in the head and watch it explode. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that goes on in warfare. This isn't a game. The only people who probably got it a little bit better than most people are the ones up in jet fighters or bombers 30,000 feet in the air because they don't have to see the damage they do. But can you really sleep with the fact that you bombed someone's city? Some people can, some people can't. This movie, Act of Valor. Has anybody seen this? I think it's just coming out. It might not be out yet. Right, this movie is done by real Navy SEALs, and it shows warfare, maybe in a realistic manner. It probably doesn't shy away from the death, but it certainly shows the U.S. Army is capable, strong, that this is a good career, that hey, we're fighting for you, that we don't make Abu Ghraib what? Right? There's no such thing as Abu Ghraib in this. And they're not ever going to make a movie about Abu Ghraib either, are they? Right? Why don't they make a movie about the victims of the 2 nuclear bombs that went off in Japan? They're never going to do that either. Oh, by the way, there is some positive news. North Korea appears to be giving up their nuclear weapons. I can't believe this. You know what they traded them for? Food. They were starving to death. I heard even 3-4 years ago they were eating people. They had human meat inside delis. Seriously. There was a South Korean dissident, or a North Korean dissident. He snuck back into his country and took pictures for 60 minutes or 2021 and took pictures of people being served. So I assure you, and I bet you after Kim Jong-il or whatever died, when his son took over, he's like, this is how bad stuff is? My God. I mean, look, leaders don't care if their people are suffering unless A, they're going to kill them like Marie Antoinette, or they start to suffer too. Right? So he was probably like, we don't even have enough food for us. Call the United States. Right? That's what the United States is hoping will happen to Cuba too, but Cuba ain't going to give up. They got plenty of sugar. I mean, every communist nation in the world is turned around except for Cuba. And it bothers me I can't buy Cuban cigars. That really drives me crazy. I don't have to go to Canada. What? Oh, well, I'd rather go to Canada. Anyway. Alright, so, again, so conflict theorists view the media as a dangerous arm of the power elites, okay? And that conflict theorists suggest that the media would never do anything to upset, Apple Computer or ExxonMobil or big-time politicians or any of this stuff. And they wouldn't do anything out of the mainstream as well. And so one of the ramifications of the media monopoly is, see here, What is certainly clear from Dickian wrote a book called The New Media Monopoly. Noam Chomsky wrote a book called Manufacturing Consent, which looked at the political economic control of the media. It said here, other media critics like Noam Chomsky and Ben Bagdikian suggest that the concentration of media control is in the hands of 6 large, interconnected, near oligopolistic chokehold companies on the major media outlets in TV, radio, movies, publishing, music, and increasingly the internet. YouTube is owned by Google now. Even though there's only 6 major media companies, there's now starting to be a little bit more. You can put Apple as a media company. Google certainly is a media company. I mean, come on, Yahoo's a media company. Hulu, but Hulu is a joint venture through major other media companies. It used to be that those of you barely old enough, I mean, you guys were kids when this was going on. There was a site. I know some of you know this site. And it actually tried to be a pay site. There was in the early days of the internet. And this is why the Stop Online Piracy Act is so important. Napster developed it basically into a file sharing site to where people would upload their songs from their CDs onto the site and you could sit there. My friend Craig was sit there for like 3-4 days and downloaded 20,000 songs. He didn't pay a dime. And like good songs too, not junk. And Napster found out, I mean the music industry found out about this, and believe it or not, Metallica, who cut their hair, went up in front of Congress and testified against Napster. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, Lars, like you don't have enough money. Yeah, Prince, you don't have enough money, do you, Elton John? Madonna, you don't have enough money, do you? $250 billion isn't enough for you. I mean, this is the absurdity of what some of these companies make. Now, I understand they want to protect their property rights. But I would say that the more your music's out there, the more people are likely to go see your dumb show, Madonna. Radiohead gave their music away, and they still got $10 a piece for each one of their albums. They took donations. And you can, let me put it this way. If someone has a CD now, it's getting harder to do now, especially with media's window now. If you try to upload songs from your friend's CD and he uploaded it already onto his Windows media player, it won't let you do it. They stop you. It's like a one-time license or something like that. So, anyway. So things are starting to change a little bit, but Napster was an example of how the internet used to be a lot more open. Now, the big issue is here, what's the impact of the media monopoly on mainstream media content? And one of the first one is the range of acceptable discourse is narrowed. For example, communist thought is not really allowed on TV. You're not even allowed to be, there are no atheist shows. If you tried to start a show about, did you imagine if someone tried to start the Satan Network? So we could, all things devil worshipping. You think that'd go over really well? Let me put it this way. Do you think that people would watch it and they could make money?
I would.
Then how come it doesn't exist?
It exists on like Showtime and HBO.
What's it called?
Dexter, Shameless.
Yeah, but that's sort of fictional. I'm talking about real people who worship the devil. And want to like try to convert people to devil worshipping.
Probably have it in San Francisco.
Right.
On TV. Because that's where black
Or how about Al-Qaeda television? How about just showing executions on TV? People would watch that, wouldn't they? So it's not all just about profit. How about something that called into question the two-party system? Do you think that would get on TV? Something that questioned the Democrats and the Republicans? No. Right? How about something that talked about consumer behavior? That encouraged people not to buy things from the store? Think that would go over well? So there are things that are not allowed on TV, really, on a lot of levels. Not allowed in the media for the most part. Although in the internet it gets through. Okay? And even though communism has been disavowed, again, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to get away with having a devil worshippers channel. Even though people would pay to watch it. Okay? Anyway. Number 2, and just as importantly, the media focuses on profitable content that many times appeals to the lowest common denominator, meaning sex, violence, sensational events, tragedies. Can somebody give me an example of what sensational events and tragedies are? Like what are some of the things that the U.S. press likes to focus on?
Like something like 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina.
Right, or even because Hurricane Katrina makes sense. That impacted New Orleans. Can anybody give you an example? Give me an example of a natural disaster that happened that had virtually no effect on the United States. And don't say the Japanese tsunami because it hurt the auto industry in this country. Remember that tidal wave that hit Indonesia? Did that impact the U.S. economy? Were there a lot of Americans that died? Yet it was a worldwide, from all the pictures and all that other stuff was such a big deal, right? It was a big deal. Okay? What about sensational stuff? What's that mean? Let me put it another way. What kind of content is easy to create, generates a lot of attention, and distracts people from reality? Think newsstand or at the supermarket. Yeah, celebrities. Why do you think the media likes to focus on celebrities so much?
Because we have to portray them in a way that they're something better than us, you know, when we want to try to achieve their life.
So they're sort of almost like pop culture royalty. They fulfill and it's fascinating, right, to see Brangelina and stuff like this and see how they live and hear these stories and compare yourself to these people, or see how Charlie Sheen acts and go, wow, I'm glad I'm not that way. Or the O.J. Simpson trial, that type of stuff is even more fascinating when a celebrity gets into trouble. Certainly, some other aspects is celebrities help to sell products, don't they? Like this red carpet stuff. Who watched this Oscar red carpet stuff? Right? Penelope Cruz talking about her dress, and now she's got a clothing line, and she didn't even really know that much about it. But they're selling conspicuous consumption. How about the TV show Cribs? That's usually with a celebrity, right? Celebrity Cribs. Here's how you need to live, like Tommy Lee, so you get hepatitis C. Anyway. And what's worse is that Pamela got it, and she tried to claim that it was by using a dirty tattoo needle, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't a dirty tattoo needle. Okay. And you think I'm joking? One of the other girls on Baywatch, she asked me to believe, she was found in her car one time unconscious with a heroin needle sticking out of her arm. I'm telling you, you guys don't know because you haven't read enough about Hollywood celebrities. The drug use among celebrities is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the worst part about it is, you'll get people like Steven Spielberg who go, yeah, I never do coke, and then he'll go in the bathroom and do coke. Or some of them will do anti-drug commercials and use the money to go get drugs. That's what Barley Crew used to do. Run low on some money, go do a rock against drug commercial, and then go get wasted. Corey Feldman said that too. They went and did a dare convention or something at a state fair, and then they went and did coke and smoked weed in the car. So, and the celebrities are also just fascinating because they live weird lives, like I was just saying. Okay, and they also distract people from. They're easy stories to do. Whereas it's easy to explain what happened to Whitney Houston, or at least to get involved in it because it's a personal story. Is it easy to explain what's wrong with Medicare and Medicaid? And the bigger issue is it easy to fix things like Medicare and Medicaid and national debt? Or how about this? If you're a news agency, would you rather write a story about Whitney Houston and drug use, or a story about abortion? Where you might piss a lot of people off. Or gay marriage, which people have very intense emotions about, where Whitney, even though she was, most people don't think, there's no argument about whether or not drug addiction is good or bad. Maybe you can argue that whether or not marijuana should be legal or not, or whether we should lower the drinking age. That's a real debate. But even that's less controversial than gay marriage, isn't it? Because gay marriage, abortion, contraception, these touch on very specific issues, particularly the religious issues as well. Okay? But celebrities are good to distract people to some extent. Number 3, the media does not seek to educate. This is another thing that they suggest that happens when you have restricted content. And is bad for children and teens and exploits them, teaching them the wrong reasons and exposing them to adult worlds. And this is what Neil Postman said in his book. One of the things he said in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, is that the media is destroying childhood. That 12 and 13-year-olds they've already seen 5 pornos by the time they're 12. And they've seen 100 horror movies. I saw a statistic once that by the time the average child is 18, they've seen 10,000 fictional murders on television. Well, that ain't nothing. You see 1 million ads by the time you're 18. I mean, that seems to be more of a problem. We have more of a problem with environmental damage than we do in murder in this world. Right? The environment can kill us all. Murder can only kill one person at several people at a time. But still, unless you use nuclear weapons. And go look at North Korea. They got rid of them for a reason. Anyway, these are some quotes from the new media monopoly. Read this when you get the chance. But if you look at the one main statement here that he's suggesting is, If, however, one looks at the properties of the dominant 5 media, and there's 6 now, or there's even more actually if you add Google and some of the internet company, it provides some insight into how it could have happened. Their steady accumulation of power in the world of news, radio, television, magazines, books, and movies gave them a steady accumulation of power in politics. Political leaders and parties know that the news media control how these politicians are depicted to the voting public. The more powerful the leading media, the more powerful their influence over politicians and national policy. Prudent politicians treat the desires of all large corporations with care, but politicians treat the country's most powerful media corporations with something approaching reverence. Meaning that they be sure not to criticize. If you're Mitt Romney, wouldn't talk crap about CNN behind their back. Because if you do, you're going to be in trouble. And Mitt's probably figured this out by now. Most polished politicians. Do you think Obama says anything out of sorts in front of media people? Are you kidding me? And also with media people, if they have access to Obama, do you think they're going to write a story that makes him look like a shill or like he's lazy, or talk about how he smokes cigarettes and how, all this other stuff? That's why you always see the tabloids, like, and this goes on with every president, like, supposedly the National Enquirer is claiming that Obama's an alcoholic. Do you think any reputable news source, even if it had evidence, is going to write that story? President George Bush I was addicted to prescription medication called Halcyon. Nobody talked about that. George W. Bush Jr. did cocaine for years. That never even came out during the election, basically. He got arrested for drunk driving one time, too. But it was all good fun. Anyway. Kids, if you're going to drink, make sure to finish the whole bottle. And then get in your car. Man, that seemed a little reckless. Anyway. I like Bush. I especially like him now that he's out of office. Can't hurt anybody. Anyway. Now we'll end it on this one. The functionalists view the media differently. They see it as more, look, when it's operating properly, it's a good thing. It doesn't exploit people, it informs people. It's a watchdog, alert system for society when there's corruption in the government or there's something wrong with the economy. It disseminates cultural history and myths. You learn about your society by watching television, by watching documentaries about the Civil War, or about watching a show about what the meaning of the 4th of July is, or even stories like The Wizard of Oz or something, or things like, who here seen It's a Wonderful Life? Right? That has American ideals in it, like the American dream, or ideas about Christmas, or if you've ever seen, even though it's Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. But this is a way to talk about value systems. We learn things through narratives. That's why they tell kids stories, right? Like the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. That isn't just a story about the Emperor being naked, is it? It's a moral story. Or like the story of Hansel and Gretel. They probably shouldn't break into people's houses. That probably should be the lesson. But and then little kids murdered that woman. They threw her in the oven. I know some of these fairy tales, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, she's breaking and entering. Stealing food, too. Okay? And then ran away like a cow. Anyway, some of these things are really odd. And Disney always takes them and twists them like Sleeping Beauty. What's the lesson of that? Don't be too beautiful because someone will feed you a poison apple? Anyway. Social order as well. Functionalists look, the media ties things together, keeps things in order. Entertainment is also an important thing. It acts as a safety valve or release for pressure. Right? You come home from work and you're all stressed, you sit down and watch your favorite sitcom, and within a half hour you're laughing and stuff. Or you go see a sports team, and instead of yelling at your boss, you yell at the Boston Red Sox or something like that. So anyway, and then to educate, socialize people not only into facts and figures, but politically, culturally, socially. You know? That there's diversity in the United States, that, even things like what our political system is like, and who's the president, and who should you vote for, all these types of things. These are important, and the news talks about all these things, as well as other aspects of the media, documentaries and things. We'll start here next time, and then we will talk about the APA articles, so make sure to read that, and I'll try to get these tests done and graded by Monday, but I can't promise anything. At the latest, it'll be next Wednesday. I hope to get them all done this weekend, but plans work. All right, everybody, have a good weekend. Be safe out there.
Just remind me.
Progressive works that are open and surprisingly successful. A generation of mostly youthful internet journalists and anthologists